Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the third day of the Blitz Fuel Invitational being held in New York City. Now, the famous YouTuber and aspiring Grandmaster candidate Levy is playing. He's off to a very bad start. He has one draw in his first three games, but two opportunities today. Will he be able to turn it around? So we're going to pick it up in the fourth game of the event. We have Levy playing with the white pieces against the strongest player in the event, the international master Josiah Stearman. Now, Levy is playing with the white pieces, and the game starts out with the move d4. Here Josiah plays knight f6, and now Levy plays the move bishop g5. Now, this is what is known as the classic trump house key opening, where white develops the bishop very early. Now, I actually was playing this opening when I was very young, around 9 to 10 years old, in the great year of 1997. I saw this red book with some orange coloring around it, written by the Grandmaster Julian Hodgson from Great Britain, and I actually picked this opening up when I was 10 years old. Now, at the time, there were very minimal variations, and it was considered something you could surprise your opponent with. But in the modern day, with things like Chessable, chess.com, all the information that is out there, it is not as much of a surprise as it used to be 25 plus years ago. So after bishop g5, Josiah plays move d5, Levy goes knight d2, we get to move knight bd7, and now Levy plays move knight gf3. Now, knight bd7 is an interesting approach here from Stearman. You might be wondering why Levy doesn't take right away so that black can't recapture with the knight. If you take right away after the move g takes f6, e3, let's just say c5, c3, and the move e5, black gets this big black center here, and already, if anybody is better, it is black. So back to the game, we get knight d7. This move does stop black from ever developing the light square b, and the game continues with the move knight f3. We get h6, bishop f4, and now Josiah plays move knight h5. Now, this is very reminiscent to the previous game that Levy had with the white piece against Ryan's son, where Ryan also went after Levy's London bishop on f4 very early with a knight h5 maneuver. So here Levy plays move bishop e5. We get knight takes bishop, knight takes knight, and now we have the move knight f6 back. Now at this point, Levy plays move e3, and we get the move bishop f5. Levy has gained what we call one tempo in this position because black has gotten rid of the dark square b, but in return he's played knight h5 back to f6. So Levy has one extra tempo, and Levy is going to try to prove that tempo is worthwhile before black can develop both of the b's in this position. So we get g4. Here we have the move bishop h7, and now Levy plays move bishop d3. Stearman trades the bishops and goes e6, and now Levy plays move h4. Now, I think when Levy played this move, he was feeling very aggressive at this point in the game. He probably thought, you know what, I should attack right away. There also are some shades of a very famous other opening, which is known as the Jobava London, where after you get d4, knight f6, knight c3, d5, let's just say bishop to f4, for example here, bishop f5, e3, e6, bishop d3, takes, knight d7. Very quickly, white can play for g4 and h4 very early, and also the pawn structure is very similar. So after we get this move h4 being played, Stearman plays bishop d6, and now Levy plays move f4. Now, this is a nice setup for white in general terms because you have the classic stonewall or diamond hands formation, as those of us who are cool kids like to call it, where you have the pawns and the knight in the center. But unlike in the stonewall system, you have the pawn on d3, which covers the e4 square, so you get this massive grip in the center with the triangle, or not triangle, with the diamond, and the pawn covers the e4 square, so the knight can't jump there. So now we get the move h5, and here Levy plays move pawn takes pawn, and this is the start of going in the wrong direction. Levy should have played the move g5. Now, I don't fault him for not playing this because from an optical standpoint, you probably think black will take, go knight g4, and now black has a bastion here, and because you push your p up very early, you cannot push a pawn back to either h3 or the f3 square to attack this horse on g4 via the two squares. So you probably think black is better, but the computer actually thinks that white is fine after the move king e2. Now, the main reason that g takes h5 is a little bit inaccurate is that it creates a slight weakness in the long term on the king side with this pawn on h4. So you get the move knight takes pawn. Levy plays queen g4, and now we have this move c5 being played. Now, perhaps instead of queen g4, Levy should have played something like queen to b3, perhaps followed by queenside castle, or maybe even queen to a4. But I understand the logic, as he expects the castle queenside, and then the queen on g4 can hit the pawn, the knight, and the pawn in the center at the same time. So we get c5. Levy trades on c5, and now he plays move king e2. Now here Levy is going for the classic Bond Cloud variation with this king e2 move. It might look a little bit awkward, but in this position, due to the situation where white can control the open c file, white controls the open g file as well, at this point the king is actually very snug on this e2 square. So now Josiah plays move queen to f6, and this is the start of making some slightly inaccurate decisions. Surprisingly, in this position, after the move queen to b6, black is actually quite a bit better here, because when white plays d4 to prevent black from capturing the pawn, black can play bishop to d6, and now black is threatening the pawn on b2, but you also have queen b5 and queen a6 as well to hit the king, and you can reroute your knight back to f6 and the e4 square as well. So Stearman goes queen f6 instead. Levy plays move rook c1. We get bishop d6, and now Levy plays move knight f3. Now at this point, I actually was feeling very optimistic about Levy's chances in this game, but Stearman shows why he is rated over 2400, and he is one of the rising juniors in America, because in this position after knight f3, you're thinking you've got D's knights, you've got some central grip, and you're doing very well. But Stearman plays move d4, shattering the pawn structure completely, where now if white takes with the pawn, you lose this pawn at f4, and you have these very ugly double stacked pawns on top of each other, and so Levy takes with the knight. But now after takes, we have even material, but black actually has a slightly better pawn structure here with these three pawns connected and a slight weakness on the h file. So Levy goes rook to g1 to stop knight g3, and now Stearman plays the move rook to d8, trying to put pressure on both the e and the d files. Here Levy inexplicably plays move b4 after 10-minute think, and this is the start of going in a very wrong direction. Now what Levy should have played here was the move queen to g5. I don't fault him for not playing this, because now if black tries to go for the move knight to f4 here, very similar to the game, however there is one difference, where after takes, white can play check, black blocks, you trade, and the pawn on g7 hangs. And now if black takes after rook f7, white will draw the game very comfortably. Because when Levy plays the move b4, now Stearman has time to play queen to d6, we get rook c5, and now we have the move g6 being played. At this point, black has consolidated his pawn structure on the king side. You have the three pawns connected here, and now if anybody is better, it is Stearman. Here Levy plays move queen to f3, and now we get the nasty move knight to f4 check, and Levy is nothing better than to take the knight. If Levy were to move the king over to d2 here, black plays knight to d5, and now you have this great knight hitting both the pawns. The rook hits the pawn on h4, queen can go to h2, and you even have b6 to try and attack the pawn on b4. Therefore, Levy takes on f4. We got the trade, rook takes d4, king e3, and now we have the move rook d7. Now at this point you're thinking, well, even material. White has 5 pawns, black has 5 pawns. This game should be a draw. All work and pawn endgames are a draw, or so they say. Now this position is a draw, but unless you are super accurate here, you are still in quite a bit of danger. So in this position, Levy plays move rook c8, we get rook d8, and now Levy decides to trade the rooks on d8. Now this move is not losing by force, but after this move, Levy is in for a lot of suffering in this position. Computer actually says that after rook to c7, rook takes h4, rook takes b7, check, and the move king to e2. White is actually okay here. You probably think it's 3-on-1. Your king is wide open in the middle of the board. Bad things can happen. But after rook d3 and rook c1, now white can line up Castle Mania on the 7th rank. You also have rook c8 with ladder checkmates, and white will draw the game. Levy decides to trade the rooks. Now we get rook h1, and in this position we run into a very classic concept here, which is, I like to say that in the game of chess, if you have one weakness, you can always defend your position, because it's very similar to, say, playing one of these battle or strategy games where one weakness, you focus on the one weak point, you guard it with your life, and you can never lose the game. But here white has what we like to call pawn islands. White has 1, 2, 3 pawns. These pawns are not connected, so all these pawn islands, you already have 3 potential weaknesses, and maybe even a 4th pawn island down the road on the queen side. So actually white has to be very careful not to lose the game. So now we get king e4. We have king f6, rook h2, rook h5, rook h1, and now Stearman brings the king over to the queen side. We get a3, king d6, king d4, and now we have the move a5 being played. Now this move is a surprisingly bad move according to the computer. Frankly, to me, it made a lot of sense to play it. Computer actually wants black to go for a different idea, which is to do nothing on the queen side, really. Play something like b6, king e4, and now go for e5 to eliminate one of the pawn islands. But in return, after we reach a position with the king on f4 and the rook on h5, now black intends to push the f and or the g pawns and win this pawn on h4. And the computer, as you can tell, says that this is completely winning. Stearman instead plays a5, and now Levy plays move rook h2, and this is the last moment where, at least according to the computer, white could draw. Frankly, if I'm being honest, I think if I were playing with white here, I'd probably lose this 90% of the time to Magnus, for example. So we can't really fault Levy for not finding the best move, but the computer thinks that after takes, now white has 4 pawn islands here, but after rook to a1, apparently due to the open b and c files, white has enough counterplay to save the game. Instead, Levy plays rook h2, we get takes, now we get to move king c6, and here Levy plays rook h1, we get to move king b5, and now we have the move king e3 being played. Now here, Levy could have tried king c3 to guard the pawn, but at this point, after rook to f5, rook to f1, for example, I think even e5 here is very strong. Maybe there's some rook a1 trick to magically save the game, but even something like b6 here with the ideas of e5, the weak pawn on the f file, the weak pawn on b4, I just think it's too much here, and you're going to lose the game. So Levy goes king e3, but now Stearman plays move b6, and at this point the game is basically over. If Stearman had played king takes b4, there would be a rook b1 check to win the pawn on b7, but after the move b6 is played, now black can take the pawn on the next turn. If you try to guard with rook b1, then you lose the pawn on h4. So already here after b6, Levy could have resigned. Levy plays the move rook to c1 here. Now we get the move king takes pawn. Levy goes rook c7, and here we get this nice move rook f5. Now in this position, black has this awesome rook on f5. You look at the pawns, they guard the rook, they guard the 2 pawns. If you can't push a pawn to d5, can't push to h5, the pawns guard each other, rook guards this, and the rook also covers the pawn push to b5. So here black leaves the rook on f5, and you simply use the king and the pawn, you march them up the board to win the game. So we get rook c4, king b3, Levy goes rook c7, b5, d4, b4, and here Levy plays the move rook c5 with one last gasp, one last trick, where if black were to trade the rooks, now after pawn takes rook, white is pushing p and getting a queen to save the game. If black were to play a move like rook to d5 here, white actually has a glimmer of hope with this move f5, because now if you were to take, after takes and h5, once again a pawn is getting through. But Stearman has no mercy on Levy here. He plays the move king to a4, and now Levy decides to go back with rook c7. If Levy were to trade the rooks here, black takes with the pawn, and after d5, king b5, king d4, black sacks the b pawn here in return to win the d pawn. King comes over, you gobble the pawns, you have 3p, and you win the game. Therefore, Levy plays rook c7. Stearman goes b3, and here Levy decides to resign the game. Now, on top of this rook guarding the pawns, everything being perfectly placed, to add insult to injury, this rook also now can build the bridge to boot. So one of the most common basic themes in rook and pawn endgames is what we call the Lucena position, or building a bridge, and that is when you reach some position like this, for example, where basically white starts checking the king runs over, and then you bring the king here, white checks, and then you play this move rook to b5, building the bridge where the pawn is free to become a queen. So Levy resigns this game after b3. He suffers his 3rd loss in a row. He's now on a half point out of 4, and it's really just not going very well. Now, what I would say about this game, unlike the other games, is after Levy missed his one opportunity to equalize with that queen g5 move, he simply got outplayed by a better player in this game. So unlike the other 2 games where it felt like a big letdown, this one was simply a situation where it felt like he was outmatched. All right, so now we're going to take a look at the evening game. Levy is playing with the black pieces against 63-year-old Serbian Grandmaster Alexis Sirkovic, rated 2401. Now, Sirkovic is a player, as I said, who's 63 years old. He's definitely past his prime, but he is someone who was once very strong. Only 15 years ago, he reached his peak rating of 2573 feet, nearly a 2600 player. So this is someone that you should not underestimate. All right, so the game starts out with the move c4. Levy plays b6, knight c3, bishop b7. We get d4, e6, and now we have the move e4. Now, there's some shades with this opening of some games that I played all the way back around the time of, I want to say, 2016. I actually was playing these e6, b6 systems a lot. I played it in the U.S. Championship against Varuzhin Akobian and Alexander Onishuk. Now, it's a system that's pretty flexible. It's considered to be a little bit dubious if your opponent knows exactly what they're doing, but if they are perfect, you get very easy play, and you can maybe take over the initiative. So we get bishop b4. Queen c2 is played by Sirkovic. I do believe that f3 is the move that Onishuk played against me, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong on that, so don't quote me. But f3 and bishop d3 are what I believe are the 2 main lines. Nonetheless, Sirkovic plays queen c2 instantly. Levy goes queen to h4, trying to pressure the pawn on e4 due to the pin of the knight. We get the move bishop d3. Levy takes, we get pawn takes, and now we have the move f5. Now, all these moves are pretty straightforward. Levy is trying to rip open this diagonal for his queenside fianchettoed bishop on b7, and now we get the move g3. If white were to take the pawn after bishop g2, it's spaghetti-o time. You're going to lose your rook in the corner pocket, and you're going to lose in a very embarrassing fashion in under 10 moves. So we get the move g3, queen h5, f3 is played, and now we have the move f takes e4 from Levy. Now at this point, both players have been moving instantly, but here Shakovich uses about 8 minutes before playing the move bishop takes e4, and this is a very serious mistake for a couple of reasons. Now, one of the old sayings from the great masters of the game, Philidor, a French master in the 1700s, is that pawns are the soul of chess. Now, when we look at this position, if white takes back with a pawn here, you have the big white center and you have the two Bs as well. Now, when white decides to take with a bishop after takes, and knight c6, you still have a bit of central grip here with the pawns, but there is one important point, which is you have this serious positional weakness, which is what we call the hanging pawns. You have c pawns stacked on top of each other, and at this point, these pawns can become serious targets. Very specifically, if you get some position, I guess we'll see it in the game anyway, so let's go forward. Knight e2, knight f6, queen d3, and now we get the move e5. Now here, if white plays the move d5 after knight to a5, castles, and d6, for example, this pawn is a permanent weakness, and black can actually try to win this pawn very easily. Say you play bishop e3, you can go queen to g6. If white trades the queens, you lose the juicer, and then you lose the other pawn as well. And if you play a move like queen d1, you simply castle the king, and now the pawn remains under attack. You do not take right away, however, because of queen to a4 picking up the horse. So at this point, when we get this position with e5 here, Levy has a very nice position, very easy play here. He can castle the king, bring the rook to the center. White has a compromised pawn structure, and it's looking like Levy is about to get his first win of the tournament. So now we get the move castles. Here, Levy decides to castle. We get the move bishop a3, and Levy plays the move d6. Now, all these moves, Levy is able to play pretty much instantly. He's got a great position. He's up on the time. Good position with D's knights. White has weak pawns. Bring the rook to the center. It's looking very, very peachy. So now we get the move c5 being played, and here Levy decides to take with the b pawn. We get the move queen to a6, queen to e8, pawn takes pawn, and now Levy goes d5. And at this point, you'll notice that black has a big black center. You have the pawns on e5 and d5, but you also have D's knights, which cover a lot of the central squares as well. So at this point, Levy is doing very, very well. You'll also notice that the knight on e2, very, very passive. It's blocked in. It has no jumps in this position, and the bishop on a3 is frankly just a very bad piece. It's on a closed diagonal. So all the trumps in the position are in Levy's favor. He's up on the clock. He's got a good position, and it's looking really, really fantastic. So we get rook e1. Levy plays queen d7. Important move, because if you play a move like h6 after knight to d4, now white is completely fine because there's a pin on the e file. There's pressure towards the horse here from the queen and the knight, and if you take, now white's pawn structure is completely fine with the pawns on c5 and d4. So Levy plays queen d7. Now we get the move bishop c1. Levy plays the move h6, stopping bishop to g5, and here we have the move f4. Now at this point, Levy decides to play the move rook a e8, and while I like this move, I'm going to be honest. In this position, the move that I would have probably preferred is this move pawn to e4, and the main reason I would have preferred this move, even though the computer doesn't love it, is because the move that looks natural for white here is to play knight to d4, but after takes, and a move like c6, let's just say bishop e3 and rook a b8, black is always quite a bit better in this position because in the long run, you have a protected passed pawn. You have this knight that can go after the bishop. You'll notice this bishop is walled in by a whole lot of pawns. So this bishop is simply a very passive piece, and it's very easy to start maneuvering your knight to g4, maybe c7, b5, maybe use the b file, whereas white has no good plan at all. So I really would have loved to have seen Levy play the move e4. I'll point out that the move the computer says is best here, after which is only 0.56, is the ridiculous move pawn to h3, which I'm going to be blunt, no human in their right mind would even consider. Levy instead plays rook e8, which is also good. We get pawn takes pawn, knight takes, and now we have the move knight d4. Now the reason I would have preferred e4 specifically because even though black has an advantage here, white gets this bastion knight on d4 where it's protected by the pawn on c3, and now white can even go bishop f4 or c6 and bishop a3, and the white minor pieces are very active suddenly. That being said, black is better here. You have an outpost on e4 for your knight. The queen can come to h3, so black is better here, but the reason I don't like this is because because if you aren't 100% precise, white will have very obvious ideas. And as you'll also notice, at this point, Levy has been pushing his opponent around on the clock. And so when your opponent's low on time, you don't want them to have easy decisions. So here we got the move knight to e4 from Levy, a very, very solid move. And now we get the move c6. Levy goes queen to h3, and now we get this move queen to e2. Now material remains even here, but Levy with a great knight on e4 targeting the pawn on c3, the knight on e5 targeting the pawn on c6, and ideas like knight g4, knight g3 simply give black an advantage. So here we got the move rook takes rook, queen takes, and here Levy decides to trade the queens, and this is a very, very big mistake. Now Levy is up 35 minutes against 7 minutes. He is up 28 minutes on the clock in the situation, and I was really disappointed to see the move queen takes f1, because if Levy had played either queen to g4 or the move queen to h5, there is zero doubt in my mind that Levy would have gone on to win this game, simply because in this position after a move like, actually let's say queen g4 because it's a move that I like a little bit more. If white plays a move like bishop f4, now you have rook to f8 pinning the bishop. There's a pin on the g file. Let's just say white plays queen g2, and after knight to d3, here come these knights right into the game, and black should be quite a bit better. The other reason this makes sense is that when you think about this from the time standpoint here, after the move queen to g4, what is white going to do? You don't know. You have to worry about the jumps to f3 and d3. You have to worry about the pawn on c3. You have to worry about rook f8. Black has so many delicious ideas in this position, and it's on white to come up with a plan to avoid losing the game. Levy instead decides to trade the queens, and now even though Levy is going to be up a pawn after knight takes c3, in this position white really has only one idea: activate the dark square B either via d2 and a5 or to f4, and after white does that, white wants to go and use the open b file. So here white has no ideas, at least at the higher levels. When you think about it intuitively, there are very limited plans, and it's just not possible for Levy's opponent to go wrong. So even though Levy is up a pawn here, it's simply equal after the move bishop to d2, because now if you try to gobble a second pawn, white can go rook to a1, and it's spaghetti-o time. The knight on a2 is trapped. You have no retreat squares. You're going to lose the knight, and now you're not even going to draw the game. You're going to lose the game. So Levy goes knight to a4 here, and now we get this move rook to e1, a very nice move, pinning this knight on e5, so you can't move the knight. If you go rook e7, at the very least, white can go bishop b4, rook e8, and bishop d2 back, and ask black the question of how do you guard the rook or the knight. So here Levy plays the move knight b6, we got bishop f4, knight to c4, and now we get the move rook to b1. Now as you'll notice, Levy's opponent has started speeding up massively over the last 5 to 6 moves, and the problem here is that white simply doesn't have anything to think about. These are the only plans in the position are to put the bishop on f4, a5, and look for the counterplay by using the open file. And Levy's opponent, even if he is old, he is still a very strong player. He obviously has a lot of class, and he's just not going to miss these ideas. So Levy goes knight b6, we get rook e1, knight c4, rook b1, knight b6, and now rather surprisingly, Levy's opponent decides to play this move a4. Now while I was doing my live commentary on my Kick channel, I thought there was no chance of a4 simply because of how much Levy's opponent had been suffering throughout this game that he would do it, but at the end of the day, he does end up playing this move a4 rather shockingly. Levy decides to play a5, and I think Levy offered a draw here, to which his opponent chose to accept. Now what you'll notice from the evaluation bar here is that white is actually a little bit better after the move knight to b5, knight to a8 guarding the pawn. Actually wait, sorry, no, it's saying make a repetition, saying you go back, and white can just play this calm move king g2 here, and the idea is that now you're threatening to go rook e1, you're threatening knight b5 as well, you have rook b5, and if knight c4 you can even go rook b7, and at this point it's actually anybody's guess as to what is going on. Should be a draw with perfect play, but the computer does give white a very tiny advantage. So Levy plays a5, the game ends in a draw. I'm really heartbroken for Levy, at least as it relates to this game, because he got everything you could ask for. He was massively up on the clock. He had a great position with easy play, but at the end of the day, he decided to trade the queens in a position where he should have kept them on the board, and that led to the game being a draw instead of Levy getting a very big boost with his first win of the tournament. Nonetheless, a draw is still a good result for Levy against a higher rated player, but he would have liked to have gotten more out of this game. So not the best day for Levy, but he does sort of break the slide. He does get on the scoreboard with a draw, and tomorrow he will have 2 more chances to get his first win in this event. So on that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap of games 4 and 5 in the Blitzfuel Invitational, which is being held in New York City. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back with some more recaps of Tata Steel, Levy's games, and everything else in between in the coming days. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and I'll see you all very soon. Have a good evening, and keep it real. See you guys. Bye.